Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to catch up with amazing humans. Today's episode, I'm so happy to welcome Barbara to this conversation. Welcome, Barbara.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very glad to see you, and it's lovely to catch up and to talk to you, actually. I'll do a very brief introduction. I'll get you to do your own perfect introduction to who you are, what you're doing. But Barbara and I, we've met through the social media community, LinkedIn in particular. But when I was searching and looking around for amazing humans to participate in these conversations, she stood out absolutely 100%. An amazing story which she's going to talk about. I do want to just put out there at the beginning of this, we will be talking about some quite challenging and difficult subjects. We'll be talking about suicide. For anybody who does have any worries or concerns, please, do take care of yourself. Take a moment. If you need to step away and stop listening, please do. It's very important you look after yourself through all of these conversations. We're going to be talking about stigma and discrimination and breaking down some of these barriers, which I think is just such an important part of the conversation of mental health. So, Barbara, that's all I'm going to say about you, but you're an amazing human. Welcome to this conversation, and tell everybody who you are.
Thanks so much. Well, I'm delighted to be having conversations about mental health. I think it's, I suppose, what my purpose is these last 12 years. So I suppose my job description, I'm the program coordinator of Sea Change, which is Ireland's national stigma reduction program, and we do stigma reduction through lived experiences and through people's voices. So we tell the stories of people who have experienced mental health difficulties and who have experienced stigma in particular. So we really look at, what does stigma mean? What does it feel like? How does it show up? And when we experience it, what the impact is. But I suppose I'll talk a little bit about that later on, but I suppose to tell you a little bit more about my story, which is what we're here for today, and how I got involved, really, I suppose. If I go back to when Sea Change started, so Sea Change is a project of Shine. So Shine is an organisation supporting people affected by mental ill health. And 11 years ago, they wanted to look at, how do we support people in a different way, or what are the barriers to people accessing our support? And stigma was one of those things. So that's where Sea Change was born, as a grassroots movement around stigma. And at the time, this would have been 2009, I would have been a year off life support. So in 2008, I had a very serious attempt on my life, and I ended up on life support for a week. And so when I woke up, I shouldn't be here. I was on 10% oxygen. I had three cardiac arrests on my way to the hospital. I nearly lost my right leg. I had double pneumonia, really, I lost half my body weight. So my journey into recovery really started with a very physical journey. But even talking about that, I suppose, jumping straight into my story begins with suicide, it doesn't, because that happened in my late 20s. And actually, for me, mental health issues started when I was probably 12 or 13. And my first experience of a suicide attempt was a week after my 14th birthday. So I went from being a very happy child, a very outgoing person. I ran from a county, I was an artist, I sang in the local choir, loads of friends, really, really good at school, all of these things. And then I changed schools and I went to secondary school here. And within that first year or two, I had a lot of difficult experiences. I got really badly bullied. I had a number of different things, but a lot of it was more about how I felt about myself and these really dark thoughts that I was thinking, and really bad self-esteem and negative spiraling. I didn't understand any of that. And at the time, it was really around, I suppose everybody thought, like, well, you're a teenager, you're not sleeping properly, you're changing schools, all these normal changes and hormones and everything else. So nobody knew what was happening. And we also have to bear in mind that this was, like so many years ago, it was over 20 years ago when that happened. So we didn't have the language around mental health and mental illness particularly. So it was only after my first suicide attempt, and actually being in casualty over that, and then going from there to a psychiatric hospital and spending several months as an inpatient in psychiatric care, that we started this journey around mental illness and mental health. And this idea that actually mental illness isn't mental health, they're two different things. And so I had 15 years of what we call severe and enduring mental illness. So that really looks at when mental illness becomes debilitating, that you can't lead a regular life, and that it impacts your life so badly that sometimes you just can't show up as a normal human being, I suppose, rather than some of the experiences where people struggle with depression, but they can still do their day-to-day stuff. So I learned an awful lot about what mental illness was, about I think things that helped, things that didn't help. But what I didn't understand was, first of all, my responsibility in it. So I was always giving my power away to somebody because I wanted somebody to do something to me to fix me.
Right.
And so I went to the doctor, I got the tablets, I went to the psychiatrist, I went to the psychologist, I did CBT, I did all of these different things, but I kept waiting for the magic pill, for the magic fix. And so I ended up getting really sick because I didn't realize how much I could do. And so it was really only after that attempt on my life where I ended up on life support that I had that chance. First of all, I was off medication because I was on up to 48 tablets a day for several
Wow.
years before that. So that gives you an idea of how bad my mental
Yeah.
illness was. And because I was on life support, they couldn't administer that medication. So essentially, I went through the detox. So to be very clear for anybody listening, if you are taking psychiatric medication, it is not a good idea to stop them straight away. I have done it loads of times. It's really dangerous and really unsafe. So it is the kind of thing that you can do, but you do it with your medical team.
Yes.
And so for me, the reason it happened was because I was unconscious and they couldn't administer it. And so I had an experience where when I woke up, I had some clarity because I wasn't medicated out of my mind for the first time in 15 years. And so I started a different journey. And that was when I then went to my medical team and I said, okay, so the best I can hope for is 50 tablets a day and being suicidal every day and ending up on a machine. Maybe we should try this drug-free and see what happens. So I agreed with my medical team that I would show up for therapy every single day, that I would go on sleep therapy, I would go on nutrition experiments, I suppose, that I would look at what exercises helped me, all of these different things. And it was really about becoming a detective about me, that I became an expert on myself. And it was not looking at what can you do to fix me as my doctor, but how can I help you to help me? You know, how can I give you my expertise so that you can use your bit of knowledge to give me the boost I need if and when I need it? And that totally changed my approach. And I started really connecting with the well-being things I had learned before, but not really utilized. And so I'm talking about things like WRAP, which is Wellness Recovery Action Planning.
Yeah.
And that was brought to the world by Mary Ellen Copeland back in the 70s. And she really looked at this idea of how do people manage. So it was like writing a manual for yourself. And there's so much information out there, and there are so many people now who train people how to do that. So you look at your triggers, you look at your coping skills, you look at what happens in a crisis, all of those things. I had done that 5 times before, but I never implemented it. You know, I had this anger around, you can't tell me what to do, you don't know what it's like. So when I started engaging with it, like it's my story, it's my life, I get to do this, I get to live it my way, I started really inquiring, and this idea of curiosity. So what is that actually like? So when I say diet, I don't mean try to lose weight or try to manage your food, but literally, if I eat potatoes, what does that feel like? Is that good for my body? If I eat meat, does that give me energy? Does it make me feel well, or does it make me feel unwell? And where does my energy come from? And being inquisitive about every aspect of my life. So that's how I ended up getting to a place where I am now 13 years off medication. For a person who has bipolar 1, that's the more severe end of
Yep.
bipolar disorder. Really, there's a lot of understanding that people who struggle with bipolar disorder need to be medicated. And for a lot of people, medication helps. But there has been times in my life where it did, but there's also been times in my life when it didn't, when it was overwhelming. And I've managed to find a way to find wellness in my life. So it's not that my life is absolutely perfect and rosy all the time now. I have blips the same as everybody else, but I know when I'm starting to feel those things. I know that if I go for a walk, I know that if I go and talk to people, it will help. I know that if I need to go on short-term medication, that might help. I know that if I stay up and watch Netflix for 4 hours and I don't go to bed until 2 o'clock in the morning, and I drink loads, or if I don't drink enough water, or if I eat pizza all week, those things are not going to help me. They're not going to help me feel well. So if I focus on the things that I know for a fact are going to help my body, they also help my mind. And that's really what happened in those first 2 years. I started finding wellness that I never knew. I never knew I could get well. I never knew I could get better. And so when I found that part of my life, then I started saying, people are dying. people are taking their lives because they don't know this. And I should be able to share my story. So, well, actually, it started that somebody should do something. And then I kind of said, you're somebody, get off your bum and go and you do it. You are somebody, you can do it. And so that's essentially how my journey into mental health and well-being and working in this area came about. So I started knocking on the doors of all the services that I had used myself as a patient, and started explaining about my journey into recovery and what had happened and how I could share my story and what tools worked for me. So I started working with a number of different groups and sharing that information so that more clients and more people could do the same thing. And at the time, Shine, as I mentioned earlier, started this grassroots campaign about stigma reduction. So I became one of the very first ambassadors or very first voices to talk about lived experience of mental illness. I then went on within 2 years to start helping them build a workplace program. And then I facilitated that for 6 years. And then 2 years ago, I took over actually running the whole project. So it's been a hell of a journey. And in the last 5 years, I have worked with the Mental Health Commission in Ireland. I have worked with the Human Rights Commission in Ireland. I have worked with the Irish Mental Health Lawyers Association. I've worked with some of our colleges like UCLA and Trinity College here and DCU. So to see that people are understanding that the lived voices of experience are important and are relevant and are valid and are as equal as a professional, that's incredible. Like really, that's amazing. And so when I get to talk to mental health nursing students about a journey and they're listening to me and I am the expert and I'm looking going, I am helping the people of the future for the me of the past. That's an amazing gift. And it's something that is really, really precious that's happening at the moment. And I think with COVID-19, it's given people a chance to say, I have mental health. I have mental, I don't know what sometimes. You know, I might be anxious, I might be sad, I might be lonely. And that's the bit that I really help people understand, because this topic of mental health, people don't get that when we say the words mental health, people hear mental illness and they think hospital.
So true.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
They think about medication, they think about being unwell, they think about all the difficulties. And so what I really help people understand is that if you've ever been happy, if you've ever been sad, if you've ever been disappointed or worried or stressed or joyous, that's our mental health. And the thing is, like I said earlier, when you get to the point where you're struggling a bit and then you're not eating great and you're not sleeping great and your mood is dipping a little bit, when we continue in that place for a long period of time, it can lead to mental illness. And it's about how do we prevent that? How do we stop it? Now, obviously, there are mental illnesses that are not in that spectrum and they're going to happen regardless. And they're more to do with a chemical thing. I understand that, but there is still things even in that case, because for me, certainly, my illness is definitely one of those chemical pieces, but I have still managed to find wellness and live it while managing a full-time job. I've bought my own house, I've run my own business, I've done all of these things regardless of what I was told. I was told I was never going to get better. I was told I would never be able to be medication free. And yet here I am. So I suppose in a nutshell, that's my journey and my story. So I don't know, you mentioned about stigma. I don't know if you have any questions around that.
Oh my gosh, you've opened up so many thought lines into all of this. So first thing I want to say is thank you for sharing that. And I know you've been sharing this story for a number of years now, as you say, and I just am so happy that you're sharing it with me for the first time. I've never heard this story, and what I find absolutely inspiring, and I'm sure people listening to this will, is that thought that says you were at your lowest point, the lowest point anybody could ever get to without dying. Let's be honest, let's be open.
Yeah.
And now look at you, you're in a space where you're thriving, you're doing so well, and like you say, all those positive things. And of course there's going to be hard days. Let's not live under a cloud that says it's all sunshine and rainbows, right? We have bad days, and that's normal. And your awareness is amazing. It's immense. And actually there's a lot of parallels in the universe that you work within and what I'm trying to do too. That thing about, we all have mental health, and when you're happy, that's part of your mental journey. That's not about that's just something else. It's attached to all of it. Mm-hmm. Every decision we make, I keep saying this to people, every choice you take every day will impact your mental health, whether that's eating potatoes or having, watching Netflix, having a glass of wine or drinking loads of water. Every single one of those choices actually impacts your mental health. I I think it's amazing. So, oh my gosh, so many things. I do want to just go back a little bit, if that's okay, before we sort of talk about where you are, what's going on with the, with the work you're doing. To that point where you got to the thought of, that's it, I've had enough, that sort of moment. How did you get there? Can you talk about those moments? Can you share sort of some insights into that? Because, for the listeners, the people that listen or watch this, what I find really important is to explain what happened, and then we obviously know what the consequence of that looked like. But can you talk a little bit about that?
I can. And I think also, in some ways, my story is either helpful or very unhelpful for some people, in that when I had that particular attempt, because obviously I have had plenty of attempts, that was just the worst one. At that time, I had the support of, I have an incredible family. They adore me and have always been behind me. I had an amazing medical team. I had just been in hospital for a number of months, so I had that experience. I was on medication. I did have support. I did have the support of my friends, and there wasn't that stigma piece really didn't exist anymore, because everybody knew, because I'd been so sick for so long. So to put it in the context of, I am that person that had everything and I still did it anyway, which is really hard. And I think for your listeners, it is really important to know that sometimes when somebody dies by suicide, we have that idea of, I should have asked, I should have done this, I should have made them, I could have done something. And quite often, yes, we can. And quite often having a conversation can make somebody think in a different way. But sometimes it doesn't. And I think that's a really hard understanding and a really hard realization, that sometimes you can try and it's not enough, and that person still feels the need to go through with this act. And I think that's the first thing to address, that for the people who have ever experienced somebody else being suicidal, and that they have been sitting with them, or that they have spotted it, or that they are bereaved by suicide, you can never make somebody do anything. Like I said, I was given all of the support and I wasn't in the space to take it. And it's only afterwards that because I lived and because I survived, that I then went, now I've got this chance, because now I understand how precious my life is. But I didn't have that moment beforehand. And I am very, very lucky that I got that chance. Not a lot of people are. So I suppose going back before that, I mentioned that I was on an awful lot of medications. So in the 3 years prior to that hospitalization, I had been in hospital 3 different times, and each of those episodes was between 3 to 5 months. So very long periods. And some of those episodes also, I would have been severely unwell. So I would have been held in locked wards. And I have had an experience of being in a locked ward inside a locked ward, which a lot of people don't have that experience. So it had got to a point in my life where I think it was that I didn't see my life changing. I had had 15 years of it getting worse and worse and worse. I was seeing the impact of what was happening to my family and how difficult people were finding it, the fact that nothing was working anymore. And I think it was those pieces that I lost hope, and I think that actually is one of the biggest gifts that we can give to somebody, to say, I know you don't have hope right now, but I am going to hold the hope for you until you're ready to take it back. And even though that might sound kind of frilly or fluffy or something silly, it's very meaningful. And when somebody says, I see you, I see the darkness that you're sitting in, I don't understand it, I don't get it, I don't identify with it, but I understand that you are experiencing this, and that's valid, and your feelings are valid. And I understand that I want you to hope and I want this better thing for you, but you're not in a space to be there right now. So I am going to hold the space for you until you get there. And I'm going to sit with you through whatever you're feeling right now until you get there. I think that's a really, really powerful thing. So there were also lots of times, to be very clear, in the years before that suicide attempt, there were lots of times that I was happy and that I was doing okay, even though I was well. Like I managed to go to college. I managed to hold down a job. There were times when I campaigned for mental health. I raised €20,000 for an organization during one of my times when I was well, So there are lots of things that can happen. And I think it's a misunderstanding that people have an idea when somebody has depression or mental illness, that they can't laugh anymore, that they can't be fun, that they can't engage. And I think that's when we start talking about stigma. And one of the quickest stories that I can give you in relation to that, or quickest examples, is if I was to say, let's say if 200 people are listening to this podcast right now, if I said to them, after this podcast, I want each of you to speak to me for 1 minute, just one. And I'm going to put it in the context of I was in mental health hospital or psychiatric hospital or whatever label you want to put on it. I was in hospital and I came out yesterday and I was in there for a mental illness because I had tried to kill myself. I would imagine of the 200 people, a lot of them would kind of go, I don't really know what to say.
Yep.
I don't want to upset her. What if I say the wrong thing? Do I say the word suicide? Do I not say it? How do I talk about this? You know, I don't know anything about mental health. I'm not a specialist. I really don't know what to say. So maybe, sure, there's 200 people here, 199 other people. She won't notice if I don't speak to her. But then what happens if every other person has the same thought? For each of those people, it's only 1 minute. And for me, it's 200 minutes of absolute silence. So to go back to the context that I gave you, I never said we had to talk about mental health. I never said we had to talk about suicide. I never said we had to talk about any of that. So we lost conversation about food, about the weather, about what's on TV, about the cute guy down there serving coffee, about the kids, about school, about the pandemic, everything. Total silence. And that is stigma. So that's why I am passionate about the work that I do now, to help people understand you don't have to be an ist. You don't have to be a specialist in this area. You don't have to be a kind of doctor to have a conversation about mental health. And I'm also not saying you say, oh, how's your mental health? Because that would be weird. You know, it literally is, how do you say, how are you doing? How are you doing? Because we say, how are you doing? And somebody will say, I'm fine. But how are you really? You know, I'm here, I'm really interested, or I've noticed that this is going on for you. And that's how we start getting into those conversations. And that's how we start really hearing where somebody is. And it's nothing to do with how much you earn or what your job title is or what training you have, you know, or what speciality somebody has. And that's how we get to the conversations.
And it's so important. I think we were separated at birth, because I think we both say the same things all the time, and it really is just that, isn't it? We obviously, you're a lot younger than I am, so just to sort of clarify that point, I didn't mean that in a you're as old and ancient as I. But I think, you know, that's so important, all of those elements that you've outlined. And I love that analogy, the thing about the 200 people, because you're so right. We become too fixated on what somebody's been through and we forget that they're a normal person underneath that, right? And they talk about the weather and they eat food and they do things, and you know, it shouldn't ever be that we just go and hone in on the thing that they've been experiencing. Oh my gosh, I just think that's such an incredible vision or thought, you know, to throw out there to anybody that is listening. So please take that, as anybody who's listening, do make sure that you talk about normal things, you know. And if you put that into that other world of physical health issues, and you know, if somebody is diagnosed, you know, sadly with something like cancer, we tend not to talk too much about the cancer all the time, because the person's living with it, they're trying to get through whatever's going on. Yeah, of course we're interested in knowing what the journey looks like, but we also do have normal conversations as well, right? So I think that's what we've got to try and bring to light with all of these thoughts. Wow, what an incredible sort of thought. Any thing about recent times that you've seen, and of course with COVID, with, you know, the restrictions, and I know you're in Ireland and I'm over in England, but what's been going on for you? How has it been for the last year?
Well, I think there's a number of different things happening. I think regardless of which side of it you're on, people are slowing down. People are taking stock of where they are. People are becoming aware of their feelings. And one of the things that I think people are also noticing is that they are becoming aware of these negative feelings, and that they're maybe getting overwhelmed by negative feelings. And I think the difference now to what was there before is that before we had this busy life that we could shove in on top of it. So we didn't have to look at it. We didn't have to pay attention, and we could just shove it down. Whereas now those external things have been taken away. We are working from home. We're not allowed more than 5 kilometers. We're not allowed to see our friends. We're not allowed to go and do all these things. So life has become very, very small. And so those things that we usually distract ourselves with aren't there at the moment. And so we're having to sit with this discomfort and this unusual feeling. And I think it's also made even more so that people are concerned about their physical health, obviously, because of the different strains and all these different things. But how it's manifesting from a mental health perspective is the like of, somebody might say to me, I was down in the supermarket and there was a guy standing beside me and he had no mask on and he was so close to me and I wanted to punch him, and like, do I need to get help because I shouldn't be this angry? And, or that, I'm going home and I'm snapping at the kids and, I'm really angry all the time. When actually what that is that sometimes that's anxiety coming out, that we're holding all of this tension in, and we're concerned about, if I go to the supermarket and I bring those germs home and I make my family sick, or what if I get sick and I lose my job? How does that, that's all in our minds all the time. So what we're seeing more is that people are identifying with irritability, with being anxious, with feelings of low mood, with being annoyed because they can't do the normal things. People are getting pissed off, That's all very normal. But what we're also seeing is that I think people are losing the hope somehow. And that feeling of those really low moods being more persistent and more long-term, that it's not going away, that is where people are starting to feel different than they were before. But also there were parts where maybe they felt those things before, but they didn't feel it as much because of all the different distractions. So I think that's happening. But the other thing that's happening is people are actually saying, I'm feeling a bit crap, or I'm feeling a bit low, or I'm feeling a bit stressed. We're now allowed to say those things. So I still think we have a way to go for people to talk more openly about their mental health as such, and their mental illness, and particularly in workplaces. However, there is an understanding with all of our communities, be that our family, be that our locality, be it our workplaces, where people are saying, it's normal for you to feel burnt out. It's normal for you to have Zoom fatigue. It's normal for you to feel stressed because you can't get outside, or because you're caring for somebody. So I think this pandemic is giving us an opportunity to take stock of where we are and to really open this conversation in a different and more accessible way. Because the fact is that everybody has mental health. The same way when we talk about physical health, we don't say, oh, physical health, that's cancer, leukemia, heart attack, lung disease, gout. Like, that's not what we do. We think physical health, we think well-being, we think sport, we think exercise, we think healthy body. And yet with mental health, we don't do that. So we have to get this shift of mental health is something that is with me 24/7, and I can influence it. And exactly what you said, I can make a different choice. So even if I was up late last night watching Netflix until 4 o'clock in the morning, drinking all day, eating awful food, I can make a different choice right now. Even if I'm in the middle of eating that pizza and I don't really want it, I can put it down. There are different things that we can do, and we can make those choices tiny little steps at a time. It's not that we have to be perfect right now and we have to be mentally healthy right now. Teeny tiny things make a difference. And I think that's the bit that we all know how to do the things that make us feel well, and to find joy. And I think that's a really hard thing at this moment in time, when we ask people, when was the last time you had a good laugh, a really good laugh, or you did something silly? Those are the things that we forget, and it's so important to build them in and regularly look at them. And for me, language is one of the things that has totally changed my life, because I used to be very, very negative in how I would speak. So let's say if it was raining outside and I'd say, God, it's miserable out. Look at what happened to my face in that moment, miserable. You can nearly feel it in your body. Whereas now I would start saying, it's not so nice out, I'm glad I'm inside. Or it's not so nice out, the ground really needs a drink. So that shift in perspective, it just changes everything.
Amazing. Wow. Yeah, you know what? I could sit and listen to you talking about this stuff all day long. Unfortunately, we're right at the end now. I do want to ask you one final question, and we'll go over the half an hour, because I just want to hear your answer. How are you feeling today? How are you doing today?
The funny thing is, I live with chronic pain. So I woke up this morning with a really bad pain in my upper back and a really bad headache. And I had a meeting with two amazing women, and then I came on to this with you, and I feel so energized and buoyed up, and I just feel so different than I did this morning.
Amazing.
I also made an effort, even though when I woke up I really didn't want to go for a walk. I really didn't want to go. I made myself get out and go for a walk and listen to my podcast and angrily stomp around my estate, So it's amazing how, if you had asked me this question 4 hours ago, I probably would have been going, I feel pretty meh, not feeling great. I'm just tired and sore and just wish some of this would just go away.
Yeah.
And yet now I feel in a totally different space, and I'm optimistic about the afternoon. The sun is shining. I'm looking forward to getting out.
Amazing.
So it's just that head shift.
It does, and that's why I wanted to ask that question, because I knew where that would come, from honesty from now. It's, and you can, that's it, isn't it? We can wake up in the morning and have a bit of a, oh gosh, it's grey outside, but the beautiful thing is clouds move, light can shine through, and once it gets, and my daughter this morning, as an aside, she got up this morning, she said, I feel happy this morning. And
Amazing.
she said, because the sun's shining. And she said, maybe I prefer the sun. And we're like, yeah, most of us do, right? We love it when we're flooded by natural light that just helps us to feel a little bit better. Barbara, I 100% thank you so much for imparting your words, your wisdom, your story. And I'm so happy that we had the chance to do this. I really am. I just want to say a huge thanks for that. So any wise words of wisdom to close? I'd like to sort of, if you've got anything you just want to give a snippet to somebody out there.
I think for anybody listening, you are more than the sum of your experiences. So whether you're experiencing a mental health difficulty, whether you're experiencing mental illness, whether you've never experienced that, or whether you're supporting somebody, our mental health is only part of us, and our experience is only part of us. So you're more than this. You're more than all the experiences you've ever had. Yeah. And that helps us know that there is more still to come. So I think that's the biggest thing.
It's a journey, right?
And go. Absolutely.
It's a journey. Life is a journey, and we're never going to get to, there's not a finish line apart from obviously the big one, but it's always going to be there. So keep on moving forward, and thank you again. Your journey is just incredible. You're doing incredible work. I'll drop all the links to everything that you do into the post for this as well. For anybody that is listening, of course, if you are struggling with any of the content or you do need extra help, support, obviously you can reach out to me, and I'm sure Barbara doesn't mind taking any questions if anybody does have anything they'd like to ask her. Of course, this is about accessibility, and we are totally accessible, but of course there are organizations out there today that do support these conversations too. If you are worried, if you are feeling worried about anything that's going on in your head, make sure you reach out, talk to people. I talk about Samaritans 116123, which is a number here in the UK, but there are organizations all over, and please know that there's always somebody that cares. That's what's really important. We can help you, and we want to help you. That's the most important element. So thank you, Barbara. It's been an absolute pleasure. I wish you all the very best for the sunshine and the walk and getting outside, get some air, and I'll catch up with you soon. Take care.
Lovely. Thanks.